whose child is the woman from Chion and carrying to sit in the main room of a nobleman's house. Drag her out immediately!
As the servants rushed in to drag her out, Bunin, who was 5 months pregnant, collapsed onto the dirt ground of the courtyard, or etel. She was desperately clutching her belly to protect her child. However, that woman who rose from the dirt ground that day would completely alter the fate of the Park family exactly 10 years later.
Please subscribe and like and leave a comment letting us know where you are listening from. We will send you a place filled with happiness and love.
Now then, let's begin today's touching old story right now. Sai Sang Askis Nama. Once upon a time, in a remote village in Chungcheong province, during the Joseon dynasty, there lived a maiden named Kim Bun. Her family home consisted entirely of a solitary thatched cottage at the foot of the mountain. Her father had passed away early, and her elderly mother managed the household alone, sitting at the loom. The lady had nimble hands from a young age. She learned loom weaving and embroidery from her grandmother when she was 7. Even the noble ladies were amazed by her skills at first sight. Mrs. Hyundai was tight-lipped. She never boasted about herself, nor did she join in on others' gossip. She simply rose early and sat at the loom. As night deepened, she mended her mother's clothes in front of the oil lamp. It was the spring of the year she turned 19. A nobleman from the village and a man from the Park clan came to visit. We wish to take you, Lady Park, as the wife of our Mr. Park. It is a matter personally chosen by the Lord Ayad. The Park clan was a renowned noble family. They possessed an enormous amount a 100-year-old persimmon tree stood proud. The villagers could not understand how such a family could choose the daughter of a poor farming family. Bunwi's mother was also simply bewildered. What is lacking that you have come all the way to see our Bunwi? It is a rude thing to do in our impoverished household. The visiting elder smiled. I have heard much about your skill and kind heart, he said. Sir, there is no one in the entire Chungcheong region who does not know your eye for people. With that, Bunin entered the gate of the Park family's house, carried on a palanquin empty-handed. All she had brought with her was her maternal grandmother's small loom and a single embroidery pattern book. Beneath the persimmon tree in the inner courtyard, Bunin met her mother-in-law, Madame Zhang, for the first time. Madame Zhang scrutinized her from head to toe. Then she coldly tossed out a remark. Is that all you brought, Matt? To think she brought only one thing for a daughter-in-law entering a noble family, Bunin replied with her head bowed. Yes, mother. My family was poor, so I did not have any other household items. That is enough. Go into the main room. In the main room, Bunin exchanged greetings with her husband Park Young-woo. Look, madam. Since this is your first time living with a nobleman, you will likely face many difficulties. You just need to follow mother's instructions. I am someone who is often away from home for business in Hanyang. Yes, my husband, I will serve this unworthy person with the utmost sincerity. Lady Park, the housekeeper, was even more remarkable than what had been heard. Milk was stacked high in the cupboards. Rice was lined up in rows in the kitchen. However, something caught Buni's eye, even more than the housekeeping itself. It was the face of her elderly father-in-law, Lord Park, lying in a corner of the main room. At that time, Lord Park was in a condition where he could not get up from his bed. Buni knelt down to offer her to him. Lord Park, gazed at the atmosphere for a long time with a piercing gaze. Then he reached out his thin hand and grasped the back of hers. It was the hand of someone who had something to say. Boonhee spent several days by her father-in-law's side after entering the Park household. Lady Jong took charge of the household chores. She volunteered to take care of Lord Park's medicine bowls. Lord Park had lost his appetite a long time ago. Still, he did accept at least the gruel that Boonhee boiled and served. Father, are you taking your medicine? You must swallow at least a sip while it is still warm. Your new daughter-in-law's hands are so firm that even the medicine feels light. Your maternal grandmother passed down such fine hands to you. One evening, Pargegam called Boonhee over to his head. Sia, come closer. Your father-in-law has something to tell you. Boonhee knelt down. The father-in-law took Boonhee's hand with his own thin hand. It was by no means a coincidence that I brought you in as a daughter-in-law. This household needed hands like yours. Firm hands that hold their lips tightly. The elder paused to catch his breath. Then he held Boonhee's hand even tighter. My dear daughter, remember this well when your father-in-law leaves soon, very soon. Those who carelessly cast people out are bound to be cast out of that house themselves in the end. If someone casts you out, do not resent it. Just go your own way. Saratasravas. If your father-in-law's words are difficult to bear, take them to heart once or twice. When the time comes, you will understand their meaning on your own. The wife did not understand those words. Father, why would you leave? Such heavy words to your 3 daughters-in-law. Please, you must recover. The father-in-law quietly watched the atmosphere. He parted his lips as if to say something more. However, in the end, he could not forget the next words. He simply lingered on Boonhee's face for a long time with his hazy eyes, then slowly closed them, as if falling asleep. A few days later, Park Dae-gam departed forever. At the deathbed, the wife held her father-in-law's hand once more. The elder man mustered his last strength and patted the back of Boonhee's hand a couple of times. Madame Jongsi quietly watched the scene from beyond the inner door. Bonin did not notice that gaze. However, the corners of my mother-in-law's mouth were already slightly stiffened by then. Lord Park's funeral had been held and the 49th day memorial service had passed. Daily life had become much quieter. Yet, amidst that silence, only Jongsi's gaze was growing increasingly sharp. Hey, what is with the kitchen? A noble's kitchen should gleam with every touch. Yes, mother, I will. Tidy it up again. When Boonhee was sweeping the inner courtyard, she would find fault with the way she was sweeping. Is that how you sweep? Is it acceptable for a broom to swing like that? In the hands of a noble and a daughter-in-law. Yes, mother. I will sweep again. After the 49th day memorial service, she had no qualms about using harsh words that she could not tolerate when her father was alive. Her husband, Park Young-woo, was away from home around that time. Madam, I will be back in a few days. I have business in Hanyang. Take good care of mother. Yes, husband. Please be careful on your way. She became someone absent from home for the first half of the month. Bonin simply obeyed her mother-in-law's words like a new bride. An inexplicable weight began to settle in a corner of her heart. Nevertheless, the words her father-in-law had left behind that day were clearly engraved in Boonhee's mind. Those words that one who carelessly casts others out will eventually be cast out of that house. Bunin did not yet understand their true meaning. It felt like her father-in-law's hand foretelling what lay ahead. It was the first year after the Park family had sent away the Park family. The Park household appeared peaceful on the surface. The 100-year-old persimmon tree in the inner courtyard returned without fail, shaking off its ripe red persimmons. However, something was flowing beneath the surface of that tranquility. Bunin had not yet realized what it was. Moonwee's day began before the crescent moon rang out at dawn. She lit a fire and set the breakfast table. The table for her mother-in-law, Lady Zhang, was set first. Next came the table for her husband, Park Young-hoo. She only set her own table after both of those tables had been served. Then she sat at the loom and wove all day long. She wove the silk Lady Zhang would wear, as well as the fabric for Park Young-hoo's robe. Rumors spread throughout the village that the Park family was wealthy. The fabric produced from the loom was beautiful in color and had a firm texture. It became increasingly common for the village gentry to send people to buy it. Where did you hear that Xia bought that single bolt of silk? Lady Zhang entered the loom room one day and asked her daughter, "Yes, mother. I heard that someone from the Kim Chan Guild came and took it. How much was it for?" "I didn't receive it myself, so I don't know for sure. I assume you have kept it, mother." Lady Zhang fell silent at those words. The lady simply placed her hands back on the loom. However, my mother-in-law's face was completely different from usual. The corners of her mouth were stiff, and her eyes were fixed on a distant place. "Seiya, it is right for you, mother-in-law, to keep the money for the silk. You just need to weave the well. Is your business to handle." "Yes, mother. I understand, and from now on, if anyone comes to buy silk, pretend you don't know them. You have no need to know the well, the money, or who it went to." "Yes, mother." After saying those words, Lady Jungsum left the loom room. I watched her retreating figure for a long time. Something in a corner of my heart felt heavy. Around that time, Lady Zhang frequently visited the detached house. The Park family house had a main house and a separate detached house. The detached house was a place Lord Park used often when he was alive. However, it had been locked ever since the 49th Day Memorial Service. Only Lady Zhang possessed that key to that house. "Seiya, the detached house is your place of examination. You have no reason to come in." "Yes, mother. I will not enter. From now on, do not even set foot in the direction of the stars. You only need to focus on the kitchen or the loom room." "Yes, mother. I will do so." She simply bowed her head at those words. However, sometimes while working in the kitchen, she would hear sounds coming from the direction of the stars that sounded like loads being moved. The sound of something heavy being moved. Sounds as if two people were pulling together as one was not enough. Sometimes that sound was heard in the middle of the night. Bunin simply brushed it off as if she had heard it in her sleep. A few days later, she went into the main room and happened to overhear a conversation between her mother-in-law and Park Young-woo. "Mother, isn't it a bit frustrating that Bui is getting so good at managing the house?" Park Young-woo was saying that to her mother. Indeed, it is quite displeasing that he is getting involved in tasks that his mother-in-law didn't even ask him to do. "However, mother, if you speak that way regarding your skills, It is something I would never know. When a gentleman comes in, the exam room inevitably gets cramped. You just focus on the business in Hanyang. Yes, mother. Upon hearing that conversation, I turned away. It felt as if my heart had sunk. However, I couldn't say anything right there. I simply returned to the kitchen and washed the dishes. Around that time, my husband, Park Young-woo, was often away from home, claiming he had business in Hanyang or business in Yangju. He was nowhere to be seen for half of every month. Even when the atmosphere was pleasant and the dinner table was set for us, Park Young-woo would often refuse it, claiming he had no appetite. I am sorry, wife. The road to Hanyang is long. I am tired. I will go inside and sleep tonight. Yes, husband. Please rest well. You don't overexert yourself either. You just need to follow mother's instructions. Yes, husband. I simply replied. However, even after my husband went into the room, I remained in the kitchen for quite some time, clearing the cold table. Whenever I missed my mother, I would go to the loom room. I opened a book of embroidery patterns that my grandmother had left behind. On the first page of the pattern, there was a single branch of plum blossoms that my maternal grandmother had embroidered herself. I gazed at that plum blossom for a long time. I recalled what my grandmother often said when I was young. Buna, a person's hands resemble their heart. If your hands are firm, your heart is firm too. My maternal grandmother had said this to me when I was 7 years old, teaching me how to embroider plum blossoms. Whenever I kept cutting the seeds, because my hands weren't firm enough, my grandmother would smile gently. Buna, only the place where the nobles go is splendid. The wife's place is filled with human envy and greed. A child like you with such a kind and heavy heart might find it difficult to endure there. Back then, in my young mind, I asked my grandmother, "Grandmother, aren't places where people live pretty much the same, no matter where?" My words may be both right and wrong, but please remember just one thing. Muna, heng muna. No matter who treats you harshly, do knows yourself or self. For young Bun-e, her grandmother's words were too difficult to grasp. However, after entering the Park household and facing her mother-in-law's hostility every day, her grandmother's words kept resonating in her heart. Why, grandmother, how did you know the inner workings of a noble family so well? She muttered to herself as she closed the embroidery pattern. Grandmother, why am I living so well in this household? There was no one to answer. The lamp flickered only once. Madame Zhang's faults became more varied with each passing day. She said the lid of the rice jar in the kitchen was crooked and that the placement of the shuttle on the loom was disorganized. It seemed that no matter where she touched, something to find fault with would arise. How can you dare fulfill your role as a daughter-in-law of a noble family when you are so incapable of doing your work properly? Did your parents teach you how to manage the household like this? I respectfully asked mother. I will rearrange it. Why? Is Siagai's loom not settling in properly? And shall I set it up for you? No, mother. I will arrange it myself. She simply bowed her head and replied. However, sometimes she would touch the loom that had the atmosphere of Lady Zhang. She examined the fabric Bunny had woven and ran her fingers over the grain. Then she remained silent for a long time. Where did you this skill? I learned it from my maternal grandmother. Mother. Your maternal grandmother. Was your maternal grandmother from a noble family with such skill? She was not from a noble family. I only heard that she was very skilled. I do not know the details. Lady Zhang spoke with a look of displeasure at that answer. Bonai had no way of knowing why her gaze lingered on her embroidery pattern. Several months passed like that. Bunin had memorized the entire household of the Park family. She knew what was in which room, whose clothes hung where, and which dishes were placed. In which compartment of the kitchen. She kept her mouth shut and simply learned it by hand. However, the more she learned, the more Bunin noticed a strange fact. The grain in the Park family was steadily decreasing. One day, not a single servant was to be seen. The silk from Lord Park's days, which had been hanging in the wardrobe in the courtyard, had also quietly disappeared. Bunin had no way of knowing where it was going. She only knew that something was always missing the day after. Madame Zhang had visited the detached house. You only need to know your place. The mother-in-law takes care of the household affairs in the inner quarters. Do not question the source nor try to find out where anything has gone. Madame Zhang had said this to Bunin one day. Bunin simply bowed her head. Yes, mother, I will do exactly what you command. Only then will you survive, and this household survive. That last remark weighed heavily on Bunin's mind. The words "you survive." It was too heavy a word for a mother-in-law, teaching Chalim Ame. She kept recalling the words her father-in-law had left behind on his deathbed, that one who carelessly casts others out will eventually be cast out of that house. MS. The wife still did not understand the true meaning of those words. However, the premonition that something was about to befall her seemed to be growing clearer. That day, Ban Bonai sat in the loom room and wove cloth until late. Long shadows stretched out beneath the lamplight. It felt as though something invisible was sitting at the ends of the shadows. A year had already passed since she entered the Park family's house. Spring had once again brought new leaves to the persimmon tree in the courtyard. It was one of those nights. Park Young-woo returned suddenly from Hanyang. He had been staying in Hanyang for a month to finalize business, and happened to be passing by the Park family's house, so he stopped by. Due to circumstances, he had to leave for Youngju at dawn the next day. I apologize for visiting so late at night. I stopped by briefly because I must leave for Youngju early tomorrow morning. Son of man, if mother finds out about this, at such a late hour she will surely scold you again. Mother is already asleep. Please do not wake her. I will not inform her when I leave at dawn, tomorrow either. That is just mother's nature. Yes, son of man, I will do so. It has been a long time since we last met. Shall I offer you a cup of tea? No, I do not have time. I am just stopping by to see your face for a moment. Please stay with me until dawn, even if it is only for a short while. Yes, son of man. Park Young-hoon entered Ban Bun-ee's room that day. As he left again before dawn had fully broken, Park Young-hoon gave a word of instruction to the attendant. Madam, do not tell mother about my visit. Mother is not by nature to be woken up at dawn. I will stop by again once the work in Youngju is finished. Yes, my husband. Please be careful on the way. When do you expect the work in Yeongju to be finished? It looks like it will take about a month. You two please take good care of a mother and stay healthy. Yes, my husband. Please return safely from Mutari. After seeing Park Young-ho off at dawn, I briefly lit the lamp in the loom room. I felt a warmth welling up in a corner of my heart. Hey. It was the first night in a year when we were spending time together as a proper couple. After that day, Park Young-woo did not come home for over a month again. From Anyang to Yeongju, and from Yeongju to somewhere else, the path of business never ceased. Bunin simply devoted herself to housework as usual. The fact that Park Young-woo had stopped by briefly that night was a secret known only to Bunai. However, around that time, Bunai's health began to feel strange. When she woke up in the morning, she felt nauseous. Even the smell of the gruel she used to love was hard to bear. Sometimes she would squat in a corner of the kitchen and gag ye egg. At first, she thought it was just the flu. However, the symptoms did not subside even after a month. In the second month, Bunin secretly visited an old female physician in the village. Madam, are you feeling unwell? Your complexion does not look very good. For 2 months I have felt nauseous and cannot stand the smell of food. I have come to see you because I have no way of knowing if it is the flu or another illness. Please lie down. Let me check your pulse. Lie. The physician checked her a while and then smiled faintly. It is clearly the second month. It looks like it has been 2 months. Well, congratulations. It is truly the third month, so it is certain. It is the first bloodline of the Park family. Madam, please take good care of your health and refrain from heavy work. Bunin could not get up from her bed for quite some time. Her heart pounded. She recalled the touch of her father-in-law's hand on his deathbed. The fact that a bloodline was entering the Park family. Bunin felt this was a responsibility heavier than anything else. Please keep this matter a secret, lady physician. It is something I must personally announce to the Park family. I understand, madam. It is something Madam Park Sidang will announce herself. Mother-in-law will be delighted by the good news. Yes, I sincerely hope so. As she left Anyeo's house, the wife took a deep breath. The spring breeze rustled the hem of her skirt once. Bunny stood in that breeze for a long time. After agonizing over it for several days, the wife decided to announce her pregnancy to her mother-in-law. Park Young-hoon had not yet returned from Yeongju. At this rate, if she delayed any longer, it would be difficult to hide her growing belly. One evening, Gunai knelt before her mother-in-law. Mother, I'm sorry to say this, but I have something to tell you. What is it? Let me see. Mother, I am told that I am pregnant and they say I am over 2 months along. At those words, Lady Zhang remained silent for a time. The lady could not bear to look up at her mother-in-law's face. It is pregnancy. Yes, mother. The female physician confirmed it. It is pregnancy. Young-woo has been in Hanyang for well over 2 months. He has not visited home even once during that time. So how can you say she is 2 months pregnant? At those words, the lady's heart sank. The incident where Park Young-woo stopped by briefly that night. The incident where Park Young-woo himself instructed her to keep it a secret. Mother, what do you mean by That he. What did young Woo tell you? Did he stop by briefly on his way to business? Yes, mother. About 2 months ago, he stopped by briefly just before dawn, and then left again at dawn. Just before dawn? Are you saying he stopped by at that hour? Without the mother-in-law knowing, yes. Mother, my husband said he felt apologetic for waking you. And the corners of Madame Jungsi's mouth hardened. That hardness reached Bunny's heart. Jaya, who can prove those words? Isn't it something only you know, not the mother-in-law? Not the servants, that the spirit stopped by that night at Amate. Mother, my husband himself said the spirit is in Hanyang. Even if he left at dawn, that is all just your word. Who saw him? Jia, tell me the truth. Who did you meet in the meantime? At those words, Bunny's whole body froze. The fact that her mother-in-law suspected her, that was more frightening and unfair than anything else. Mother, as the daughter-in-law of the Park clan, I have never done anything unfaithful. My husband definitely visited that night. The female physician also said it had been over 2 months, and the timing matches that night perfectly. Even if the physician is right, would that serve as proof that the spirit visited? I, your mother-in-law, must send someone from Hanyang to investigate whether the spirit left Hanyang at that time, and who saw it. Yes, mother. If you investigate this, the truth will surely be revealed. That was my answer. However, Lady Jung gave a cold smile at that reply. Bunin did not know at the time what that smile meant. It was 3 months later that Park Young-woo returned from Yangju. Gooni's belly had already entered its 5th month and was beginning to bulge. It seemed Lady Jung had been eagerly awaiting Park Young-woo's return. Young-woo, come here and sit down. Sabayami has something to ask you. Yes, mother. What is it? Did I stop by the Park family's house briefly about 2 months ago before leaving for Yangju, after finishing business in Hanyang? Bunin knelt to one side of the table, a cable. Bunin's heart and thoughts awaited Park Young-woo's answer. If Park Young-woo would simply reply, I stopped by briefly that night this year, everything would be resolved. Park Young-hoon glanced at his mother's face for a moment. Then, without ever looking at her, he answered Mother, I left directly for Yangju from Hanyang at that time. I never stopped by the Park family's house. At that answer, the lady felt as if all the blood had drained from her body. She looked up at Park Young-woo's face once. Park Young-woo, however, refused to meet Bunin's gaze. My husband, how can you say such a thing? Didn't you clearly stop by just before dawn that night? You personally instructed me not to wake mother. You also mentioned that the business in Yangju would likely take about a month as you left at dawn. Well, Madam, what are you talking about? I went straight from Hanyang to Yangju at that time. I have no reason to stop by the Park family's house. Husband, how? It was definitely that night. That night when the spring breeze was blowing, before dawn had even broken. Madam, stop it. I have no reason to stop. Park Young-woo's voice did not waver. However, within that wavering there was something like a firm resolution. Park Young-hoon was looking away from the atmosphere while receiving his mother's gaze. It was clear that his mother had sold everything and warned him in advance. Look here. See us. The young Wu also did not stop by that night to eat. You are lying all by yourself. Mother, how could you say such a thing? To my husband, shut up. Shut up. I will not listen to you anymore. Madame Zhang's shout echoed through the inner room. I prostrated myself right there on the spot. It felt as if my heart was breaking. My hands trembled so much that I could not even hold my clothes. The mother-in-law will handle this matter. Just stay in the main room. Do not come out until your mother-in-law calls you. Yes, mother. I replied. Then I went into the main room and sat beside the loom. I touched the shuttle once. Its hand was trembling. It was the next morning. Lord Zhongxi had all the servants gathered in the inner courtyard. The cry to drag me out of the main room reached as far as the field by the gate of the Park family's house. Whose seed is this woman from Cheonan carrying to sit in the main room of a nobleman's house? Drag her out immediately. The servants rushed forward and dragged Bunhui out. Bunhui, 5 months pregnant, had a belly so swollen that it could not be covered even by a cloth wrap. Bunin was dragged by the servants' hands and tumbled straight onto the dirt ground of the inner courtyard. Her palms were badly scratched. Instinctively, I brought both hands to my belly. I desperately covered my stomach to protect the child. Mother, why are you doing this? Please listen just one more time. My husband, surely. Shut up. I will not listen any further. A daughter-in-law of the Park family has committed adultery, so she cannot be kept in this household. Young Wu, can't you say a word right here, ear? Park Young-hoon stood in a corner of the yard. Without ever making eye contact with Bunhui, he simply bowed his head at his mother's shouts. Exile this man from the Park house. Do not send him back to his parents' home. Since he has brought impurity upon the Park family, even that household will not accept him. The servants stirred up Bunhui and dragged him out the main gate. The last thing Bunhui saw was Park Young-hoo's hardened face and the stiff corners of Madame Zhang's lips. A smile that seemed somewhat satisfied had briefly crossed those corners. Bunin was abandoned like that on the path out the main gate of the Park house. The early autumn wind was particularly cold that day. Bunin sat there for a long time. She could not even go to her parents' home. Her mother-in-law had ordered her not to return to her parents' home, and her own mother would not accept a daughter who had committed adultery. Bunin simply headed toward the outskirts of the village, following wherever her feet took her. She walked only when her legs gave out and she could go no further did Bunin sit down beside a large rock by the roadside almost on the night was deep. The lady dozed off, clutching her belly with both hands. In her dream, someone sat on her head. It was her father-in-law, Lord Park. Sia, wake up. Your father-in-law has something to tell you. Father, how could you be in a place like this? Go to the market at dawn tomorrow. Go to the large Zelkova tree to the east of the market. There is someone waiting for you there. Someone waiting for you. Who is it? She asked. You will find out when you get there. It is someone your father-in-law has told you about, so do not doubt and go. At those words, she opened her eyes. Dawn was just breaking. She could not tell if she was dreaming or awake. Yet, the warmth of the back of her father-in-law's hand seemed to linger. Bunin stood up. Wrapping her hands around her belly, she moved toward the east. She walked eastward toward the large Zelkova tree, to the east of the marketplace. Morning mist had settled over the village road. Bunin's plain cotton skirt was stained with dirt. Her body felt heavy, and her 5-month-old belly weighed heavily with every step she took. Madame Hyundai did not doubt her father-in-law's words. It was after the sun had risen, about 2 spans, that she reached the marketplace. The marketplace was bustling with people from early dawn. Bunin walked through the crowd toward the east. At the far end of the marketplace stood a large Zelkova tree. Its thick trunk looked as if it were well over 100 years old. Beneath that Zelkova tree, an old man lay collapsed. It was an old man with a white beard reaching down to his chest. His clothes were clean, but his body was drenched in cold sweat. Passers-by simply walked away at the sight of the dirt topi. I stopped for a moment upon seeing this. I, too, was in a situation where I had nowhere to go. My 5-foot belly felt heavy, and my legs felt weak. However, I immediately knelt beside the old man. "Sir, please come to your senses." Boni shook the old man's shoulder. The old man opened his eyes dimly. "I'm a passerby. I will help you, sir, so let's take you to a nearby place." "Where are we going?" "It is the big Sossel, 2 alleys away from here. Everyone in the village knows the Han family house." I slowly helped the old man to his feet. My own body was heavy, but the old man's was heavy as well. Nevertheless, I moved him 1 step at a time. Finally, when we arrived in front of the main gate of the big Sosul, servants rushed out from inside. "Sir, why are you late? Why do you look so pale?" "A woman has come to support me." "Take her inside." The servants escorted the old man inside. Bunin stood there hesitating for a long time. She thought her own business was finished, now that she had escorted the old man. However, she was at a loss as to where to go. She was in a position where she could not go to her parents' home or the Park family's house. Just as Bunin was about to turn around, the old man's voice was heard from inside. "Take that woman inside. I need to let her stay for." A servant approached Bunin. "The lady is calling for you. Please come inside." Bunin followed the servant inside. The Han family's house was large and neat. In the inner courtyard, there was a large well and a well-polished wooden platform. The old man was sitting on that platform, waiting. "Come and sit down. Thanks to you, I have made it home safely." "It is no trouble, sir. It is a relief that you have not suffered any major misfortune. From the sight of you, you appear to be a noble woman and her daughter-in-law. How is it that you are out in this early morning market 5 months pregnant?" At those words, Bunin bowed her head. She had no words to offer in response. If there is a difficult reason to speak, I will not insist on asking. I will ask just one thing. To which family did you marry? I went to the Park clan. Park? The Park clan of Chungcheong province, Yona. Yes. The old man remained silent for a moment. Then, after a while, he spoke. Then you are Lord Park's daughter-in-law? Yes, sir. How do you know my father-in-law? It is a long-standing connection. I have had a relationship with Lord Park since my youth. I knew that he had passed away. At those words, the lady's heart trembled once. Her father's connection, her father's dream. Beneath the cover tree, supported by the old man. None of it seemed like a coincidence. Elder, what is your name? My name is Han Chibok. The villagers simply call me Old Man Han. You may call me that. Yes, Elder Han. Old Man Han gazed at Booney's face for a long time. Then he let out a deep sigh. Those whom Sia carelessly casts out are bound to be cast out of that house in the end. I do not know what you are going through right now, but I will tell you just one thing. Do not harbor resentment and go your own way. There is not just one path. Booney froze at those words. The very words her father-in-law had left behind on his deathbed. Not a single word different, and how could the exact same words come from Old Man Han's mouth? Only then did she vaguely realize the fact that her father-in-law had entrusted something to Old Man Han just before he passed away, and that his unspoken words were being carried on through him. Elder, why are you saying the exact same words as my father-in-law? It is simply that we share the same teaching. Saya. Please stay in this house for a while. Shouldn't you have a safe place until you give birth? I am sorry, sir. There is no way for me to accept this. Do not accept it. Just repay it. It is as if this old man owes you a debt, so you just need to repay that debt to the child you have taken in. Bunin bowed her head deeply at those words. Bunin was treated like a guest at the Han family's residence. He gave Bunfi a room in a corner of the main house and ordered the servants to serve her as if she were the mistress. Bunwi's belly grew bigger day by day. Old Man Han had already invited the best female physician and midwife from the village. On the day Bunwi gave birth, the midwife arrived early in the morning, around 1 a.m. Madam, it seems the first delivery is taking quite a while. Please brace yourself. Yes, midwife. The wife's labor pains continued from dawn until midday that day. In the room of the Han dynasty, groans of anxiety leaked out. An old man standing in the guest quarters crossed the courtyard and surveyed the inner quarters one by one. He prayed and prayed again for a safe delivery. Finally, as the midday sun fell upon the center of the inner courtyard, a baby's cry burst forth from the inner quarters. It was a resounding cry. Madam, it is a boy. He is strong. At the midwife's shout, the old man's face brightened. At the end of her labor pains, Bunin held the child in her arms. It was a small, warm baby. Bunin held the child in her arms and wept for a long time. Mutarago, my child, she murmured. And she named the child Mutarago. The midwife held the baby up and told Bunin, Madam, look at the baby's back. There is a peculiar mark on it. Benin examined the child under the midwife's touch. A single distinct red crescent-shaped dot was clearly imprinted in the center of the child's back. It was a tiny dot no bigger than a fingernail. Benin gazed at the dot for a long time. This is the mark of the Park family. I haven't heard of any specific mark. No. However, a crescent-shaped dot like this is rare. It would be best to have it verified by the experts. Midwife, perhaps because it is the first child, the labor was long. It was long. Still, the baby is strong and the mother is firm. So both will be safe. You just need to take good care of yourself, madam. The midwife said this and tidied up the room. Benin guessed what that dot meant was the touch of Lord Park holding the back of her hand, her father-in-law's passing, his dream, and the fact that Park Young-woo had poorly visited that night. Handi terskeret. Safety was the bloodline of the Park family. The lady deeply engraved this fact in her heart, and she made a promise to herself. I will never show this child's back to Park Young-woo. I will never let those who cast me out know that this child is of the Park family's bloodline. Anna's Ekfera state. She had resolved that this child was not just her own, but not a child of the Park family. When Bunai first met an old man, a few days after giving birth, the old man smiled at her. Hey, I have seen a healthy child. I heard his name is Mutal. Yes, sir, I named him to mean survive. It is a good name. The name Mutal does not merely mean to survive a mave. It means to grow up without lacking anything. I will help him become that way. So please recover with peace of mind. Sir, how can you do all this for me? I do not know how to repay this kindness. The way for Sa to repay it is for you to walk your own path. If you stand upright, the old man's debt will be repaid. At those words, Bunin simply bowed her head deeply. It took over a month for her to recover. An old man looked after the atmosphere. It was 2 months later that Doni sat before the Eving for the first time after her recovery. A loom had been set up in the inner quarters of the Hanzi deck. It was a loom that the old man had prepared specifically for Bunwi. As Bunwi sat at the loom and began to move her hands, the Hanzi servants gathered around one by one. Madam, how is your skill? So exquisite and exquisite. The texture is finer than the cloth woven in our main deck silk room. Is it merely a skill learned from grandmother? The old man personally examined Buntwi's blood. He ran his fingers over the cloth for quite a while. Then he slowly opened his mouth toward Bunwi. Where did this skill come from? I learned it from grandmother, sir. Yuri, sir. What was grandmother's name? I heard she was Song. I do not know the details beyond that. The old man remained silent for a long time. Then she nodded deeply toward Bunai. Saya, it seems your maternal grandmother was no ordinary woman. This skill is not merely something honed by hands in a royal household. It must be a skill passed down through generations in some ancient noble family. And not just any noble family either. Your maternal grandmother was truly an ordinary countrywoman. Living in the mountains, she even performed offerings herself. Sia. Just because a person lives in the mountains does not mean their roots are in the mountains. More often than not, people live with their own stories buried within them. Your grandmother was like that too. Yes. Bunny's heart fluttered at those words. She recalled something her grandmother often said when she was alive. That saying the house of the nobility was a place of only splendor. How could her grandmother have known the inner workings of a noble family so well? Bunny felt that this question was now vaguely being resolved. Once Bunwi had fully recovered from childbirth, an old man named Li-un began teaching her the ways of business. My dear, your weaving skills are excellent, but that alone is not enough. You must learn business. When I say business, I mean the fabric. Trade, sir, me. It is selling what you have woven with your own hands. If you merely weave, it will be taken away by someone like a mother-in-law. True business is weaving with your own hands, selling with your own hands, and receiving with your own hands. Bunwi silently nodded at his words. The old man's teaching was swift. Business is not about greed, but about observing people. If you know what the customer wants, what they lack, and whether you possess something they couldn't find anywhere else, greed will follow. Was it to me? Follow by one. Yes, sir. I will take that to heart. Their first shop was a small fabric room in a corner of the marketplace. It was because the old man had given a sack of cloth from his trading company to Bunwi. Bunwi displayed the silk woven on her loom in that small fabric room. Miss Sia, how much is a bolt of 2,000? A customer asked, examining the silk in Bunwi's hand. It is Danyang silk. Please look closely, Kaketa. The grain is firm and the color is beautiful. Danyang, huh? You can buy Seon-won silk at other shops, but please compare it with the fabrics from other places. The texture feels different to the touch. Even if you wear it for a month, the drape won't lose its shape. The customer examined Bunwi's silk for a while and eventually brought out the Danyang silk. Miss Sia, you are right. The grain is different. Take a bolt. Thank you. I will let you know if good fabric comes in again. Another customer entered. Miss Sia, who wove this fabric? The grain is extraordinary. I wove it myself. Sir? I can weave about 2 bolts a month. Nini. 2 bolts a month. When the next one comes in, please set aside a bolt of cloth in advance. Cloth suitable for sending off a daughter-in-law to her new home. Yes, sir. If you let me know in advance, I will prepare it separately. Bunny held that first bolt in her hand and gazed at it for a long time. It was the first money she had earned from selling cloth she had woven with her own hands. The silk boxes that her mother-in-law had kept from the Park family. Now those precious silks were coming directly into Bunny's hands. That evening, an old man heard the news of Bunny's first sale and smiled. Yeah, you did well. The first money is just the beginning. Since this work started with your hands, you must see it through to the end with your own hands. Yes, sir. I will work even harder. Bunny's first earnings soon became 10, and those 10 became 100. Following the old man's teachings, Bunny spent more time attending to her customers. Bunny kept her mouth shut and simply listened to who was looking for what fabric, which nobleman's estate was hosting a child's marriage, and which village and market was the most crowded. Then she transferred that information to her loom and shop. 2 years passed and Johnny's fabric shop became the busiest store in the marketplace. An old man gave Bushuk and shop. Do you think you can manage 2 shops at once? Asked the old man. Yes, sir. It won't be difficult if I just keep the staff together. She then brought people to that second shop. A daughter-in-law driven out by her mother-in-law, a widow whose husband had left her early, and a young woman whose parents refused to take her back. The people who visited Buni were all women with stories that were somehow similar to her own. Madam, how do you manage to take in people like us? One woman asked Bui. You just need to be skillful with your hands, she replied. Nature does not ask. If you work well and are honest, that is enough. How can I ever repay such kindness? Do not repay it. Just take in someone like you next time at Je작하고. The women possessed by her followed her, calling her mime. He simply considered it as extending to others the same kindness that the old man had shown her behind her. Around the time 5 generations had passed, Bunin personally set out for her first trade in Hanyang at the old man's request. It was a textile transaction with a major merchant guild. This is my first time trading in Hanyang. The people here must be formidable. Yes, sir, I will do exactly as you have taught me. Upon arriving in Hanyang, Bunin initially hesitated under the watchful eyes of the textile wholesalers. The people of Hanyang did not look kindly upon the fact that a rural guild was sending a woman to conduct business. How could the Han Guild send a woman? One wholesaler scoffed at Bunin regarding such a major transaction. The old man sent her because he believed she was someone worthy of being entrusted with this trade. Please take a look at the fabric. If you examine the grain once, you will understand why I sent someone. As Banai unfolded the woven fabric, the wholesaler's eyes changed. It was a cloth so sturdy and beautiful in color that it was hard to find even in Hanyang. Ms. J, since this cloth is originally part of the Han Merchant Guild, where did you acquire such skill? Yes, it is a new fabric for the Han Merchant Guild. I wove it myself on the loom. You mean you wove it yourself? You mean Ms. Sia? Yes, sir. To think someone with such skill would come all the way to Hanyang to trade in person, I will give you 5 bolts for now, Wotosing. Bring more next time. I even gave you 10 bolts this time. Thank you. Next time, I will bring a cloth with an even sturdier grain. Muni Mai Sinhyang was thus Sungkame concluded. Throughout the journey back from Hanyang to Cheongcheongdo, a corner of Buni's heart remained calm. Mutal turned 5 years old. He found time to play with the servant children under the persimmon tree in the inner courtyard of the Hansi deck. However, one day I ran to the loom room in the Mutari district and asked, Mother, why does Mutal not have a father? I heard that all the other children have fathers. I could not answer that question for a long time. Sadness lingered on Mutal's small face. Mutal, your father is far away. Someday, when you grow up, you will come to know. Until then, your mother and an old man will protect you, so do not worry. Yes, mother. I understand. Mutal simply nodded at that answer, left his mother's lap, and ran back to the front yard. Yard. I watched his small back for a long time. It seemed as though the crescent-shaped dot hidden beneath the fluttering hem of his clothes appeared and disappeared each time. As the years passed, Bunwee's business grew. After 7 years, there was virtually no opposition throughout the Chungcheong region, as if there were no people not seeking Bunwee's silk. I also helped out with the business of the old man's trading company. She even came to personally oversee the liquor transactions. It was said that if it wasn't Bun, she had any fabric in stock no matter what was requested. The market merchants were whispering about it. However, Bun was not frightened by the rumors. She simply devoted herself more deeply to observing customers and people, just as the old man had taught her. It was a spring day 8 years later. The old man summoned Bun to the guest quarters. Around that time, the old man's strength was failing. His head had become more bowed, and his gait had slowed. Yet on that particular day, the old man's expression was resolute. "Sir, you have called me so suddenly. Is there something wrong?" "Sia has something to tell you. Come into the guest quarters. I have dismissed the servant." "Yes, sir." "Sia, come here and sit down. Your father-in-law has something to tell you." Bun felt her heart tremble once at the old man's words, which were different from usual. The word acupressure. The old man had never addressed her that way. "Elder, how could you say such a thing?" "Sia, please sit down for a moment. I must now tell you the story your father-in-law hesitated to tell for a long time." The woman knelt down in the guest quarters. The old man instructed a servant to bring a small box from a corner of the guest quarters. The box the servant brought was a sturdy wooden box with a fine lacquer finish. When the old man opened the lid, his wife found a small seal and written in the rain inside. "Do you know what this seal is?" "Isn't it the seal of the Han Merchant Guild?" "That is correct." "And this letter was sent to you by your father-in-law, Lord Park, just before his death." At those words, Bunnan felt as though she had caught her breath. Lord Park's handwritten letter. The fact that a letter sent by her father-in-law just before his ends was kept in the old man's box. With trembling hands, the woman took the letter and unfolded it. The handwriting was faint. The handwriting appeared to have been written with trembling hands just before his death. Yet, the content was clear. "Comrade Han, look here. My daughter-in-law is a person who will find it difficult to live safely in this household. My wife has a cruel nature, and her son Young-won is a man who cannot escape his mother's shadow. I do not know who will look after the household once I am gone. So please grant this old man's request just one more time. If the household appears before you, please take him in. That child's hands aren't no ordinary hands. If you take him in, you will be of some help." The lady read the letter over and over again for a long time. The handwriting faded. Tears began to fall one by one from her eyes. "Sir, your father-in-law made such a request." "Indeed. Your father-in-law sensed everything just before his passing. You knew how your wife would treat you, that Young-gu was not the kind of man to take your side, and that you would eventually be cast out of the Park family. That is why you sent this old man to ask for your help in advance. Why did you not inform me of this matter sooner, my dear? If you had told, you would have become someone who lied on this old man. It has come to pass for you that you did not know about your father-in-law's affairs until you stood on your own 2 feet. Now you stand on your own 2 feet. You built 5 shops with your own hands. And you are taking care of people with your own hands. Now, even if you know of your father-in-law's request, you will not waver. Bunin lay prostrate on the spot for a long time. The hand her father-in-law held just before his death. The words he left unsaid. The requests in her dreams. The teachings like the support of an old man under the Zelkova tree. Everything was a single picture. It was the very picture her father-in-law had drawn just before his passing. Do not repay the kindness of my elder, whom I know how to repay. I granted your father-in-law's request. I did not intend to give you anything. However, let me tell you just one more thing. The old man patted Bun Hui's shoulder once. Do not take your father-in-law's kindness for granted. Being cast out of the Park family was not your fault. Do not forget that, Igat. And someday the Park family will reach you again. Bite you again. When that time comes, you decide for yourself what to do. This old man will no longer lay a hand on you. Yes, sir. From now on, I will stand on my own 2 feet. She replied. Yet in a corner of Bunhwa Land's heart, as though her father-in-law's hand was warmly touching her once again. It was as if the words he could not say on his deathbed had finally been fulfilled. That saying that one who carelessly casts others out is bound to be cast out of that house oneself. With that saying passed down through an old man, and the crescent moon dots embedded in the skeins of yarn, Bunin sat in the loom room that night spreading out the embroidery pattern until late. Why was it grandmother's embroidery pattern? A single plum blossom branch on the first page stood out clearly under the lamplight. The lady gazed at that plum blossom for a long time. Grandmother, father-in-law has watched over me so kindly from an early age, and that old man accepted father-in-law's request until the very end. How can I ever repay this kindness? She spoke to the plum blossom branch as if talking to herself. The plum blossom offered no answer. However, the flickering of the lamp seemed to touch Bunin's hand once. It was around the time when the atmosphere had grown. Arrival. In the Chungcheongdu region, the name of the Park family began to be mentioned with increasingly different meanings. Mr. Park, how is things going? A customer at the marketplace was examining silk in a shop with a lively atmosphere, making a deep bow. At those words, Bunin paused for a moment, but her expression remained unchanged. When you say Mr. Park, do you mean the Park of Chungcheong Province? That is correct. There is widespread rumor that Mr. Park took a concubine from Hanyang. They say she is from a Gisayang house named Oxion, and that as soon as she was brought to the Park household, she began to devour the housekeeping. As if that were the only thing that happened. There are also rumors that Mr. Park dabbled in gambling, attensibiling. They say his mother, Madame Jongsi, even sent someone from Hanyang to drag her here once. The lady listened silently to the customer's words. One corner of her heart felt heavy. Yet, in another, her father-in-law's words came to mind. He had said that those who carelessly cast people out are eventually cast out of that very house. On another day, I also heard rumors regarding Madame Zhang of the Park household. There is a rumor that Madame Zhang is embezzling the Park family's assets. If embezzling them, where exactly? They say there are traces of an enormous donation Manamjong made at a nearby temple. However, relatives discovered that the donation actually came from the Park family's assets. The relatives went to confront Madame Zhang, but she insisted they were her own private property and refused to hand them over until the very end. I myself trembled at that rumor. Around the time I entered the Park household that year and began to learn the household affairs, the sound of loads being moved from the sieve, the dwindling grain that Madame Zhang frequently visited, the disappearance of the slaves, and the fact that silk had been absent during Lord Park's time. Everything came to mind clearly now. It turned out that the mother-in-law had been siphoning off the Park family's assets into her own private funds and donating them to a temple. There is a rumor that the newly appointed Lady Zhang intends to offer a third daughter-in-law. I heard that this is the third attempt. The merchant informed me of this on another day. If you say it is the third, it means that even though Oxian, the concubine, came in, she had no children, so Lady Zhang wanted to offer another official daughter-in-law. However, the third daughters-in-law realized the financial situation of the Park family twice and turned them down. They say this is the third person. Did the third person turn down as well? Yes, that is correct. Word of the Park family's mounting debt had spread throughout the Chongcheng region. So how could a respectable nobleman marry his daughter off to that house? The lady remained silent for quite a while at those words. In the end, the mother-in-law would not be able to offer a new daughter-in-law. The fact that the fishing family's bloodline was about to be severed was becoming increasingly clear. It was one day, another year later. On her way back from business in Hanjiang, Bunin happened to meet a woman from the opposite side of the country. She introduced herself as Park Young-woo's second cousin. If you say you are not Bunin, then you must be the lady of the old Park family, not Bunin. The lady said, sensing the atmosphere, and let out a deep sigh. How do you know me, madam? She asked. I briefly saw you entering the Park family house 10 years ago. It was a connection formed. When I briefly visited Mr. Park Young-woo's wedding banquet around that time, I had heard that you had left the Park family so early and had been taken under control for a while, but I did not know that you would be building a great merchant guild. At the lady's words, the lady simply bowed her head. She let out another deep sigh. Your Honor, there is one thing I must tell you. Since Mr. Park Young-woo took Lady Imha out, he has never once been able to have a child. A child. Neither that concubine named Ocasio, nor with the other concubines he brought afterward. A bloodline has not entered that house for nearly 10 years. There are even rumors that Lady Changxi called a shaman. At those words, Bunin's heart sank. To think that Park Young-woo was a man unable to have children. Then the fact that the child she was pregnant with while pretending to be at the Park family mutual was Park Young-woo's only child flashed through her mind all at once. Nuniwish noneako. The crescent-shaped mark on Mutal's back. Madam, that is truly the truth. So it is certain. It is something all the relatives of the Park family know. Park Young-woo is a man who will not be forgotten by the next generation. It is as if the Park family will end with Young Han. Bunin watched the lady leave and stood by the roadside for quite a while. The words her father-in-law could not say as he held her hand just before his death. It was clear that he had suspected she was a person too destined to have children. The fact that she was the last descendant of the Matari Park clan. Bunin was shaken by that realization for a long time. That day, Ban Buni unfolded her maternal grandmother's embroidery pattern again in Old Man Han's room. She gazed deeply at the pattern on the second page. Old Man Han had once told her that it was a family crest passed down through generations in ancient noble families. The fact that her grandmother had left that pattern on the embroidery cloth, the fact that her grandmother was from a prestigious family who had concealed her identity and settled in the countryside due to a political upheaval. Bunin now vaguely understood all of this. Grandmother, mother, and father-in-law have all led me here, Potako. Bunin muttered to herself. The lamp flickered once. Around that time, another rumor was circulating. It was the rumor that the Park family's debt was steadily increasing, with Park Young-woo's gambling occasions extravagance in Jung Si-im's embezzlement all compounding. The Park family's vast estate was nearly at rock bottom. Rumors said that they had accumulated debts to wholesalers in Hanyang and were unable to repay the money borrowed from the gentry of Chungcheong province. Or they said that the Park household would soon be put up for sale. A merchant at the marketplace informed Bunwee of this. At those words, Bunwee paused for a moment. If you say putting it up for sale, they say they are selling the entire house and the courtyard flyers all at once. The Park family's debt is so massive that there is no way to repay it without that sale. What is the sale price? They say it will be a price sufficient to pay off the debt, so the Park family will be valued significantly lower than its original price. However, there is no woman in the Chungcheong region capable of managing such a large household all at once. Upon hearing these words, Bunin lingered in a corner of the shop for quite some time. Her heart pounded dying. The fact that she could purchase the Park family's house with her own hands. The fact that she could kick her mother-in-law out of that house. That reality settled heavily in a corner of Bunin's heart. Several days passed without her making up her mind. In the meantime, an old man fell ill. His strength had long since completely failed him. Yet on that particular day, the old man could not wake from his deep sleep. A female physician came, checked his pulse, and shook her head. Dea, it seems the elder will not last much longer. Prepare yourselves. At those words, Bunin knelt at the head of the old man. The old man gazed at the atmosphere for a long time with his hazy eyes. Sia, father-in-law, you must leave now. Elder, please, do not say such things and get up. Please, just one more time. My father-in-law has one request. Just as your father-in-law left a request to the old man right before his death, I, too, would like to leave you one request. Yes, sir. Please, tell me whatever you wish. How you decide on the affairs of Baxi is entirely up to you. However, do not make that decision out of resentment in your heart. Resentment is what destroys you first. If you simply decide on that path according to your own will, I, this old man, have nothing more to say. Yes, sir. I will take that to heart. Is Mutari growing up well? Yes, sir. Yeah, he has turned 9. He walks following you like a grandfather. I wanted to see that child one more time before I left. Please bring him here. Bunin sent a servant to summon Mutal. As Mutal knelt at the head of the old man, he stroked Mutal's head once with his dry hand. Mutal, my dear, Take good care of him and grow up safe and sound. Consider this rain always the spring behind you.
Yes, grandfather. I will stay safe and sound.
After finishing his words, the old man patted Booney's hand. That touch bore a striking resemblance to her father-in-law's. The lady held the old man's hand tightly with both of hers and wept for a long time. That night the old man passed away as if he had fallen asleep. It was an autumn night, marking exactly 10 years since Booney had been driven out of the Park family's house. Booney watched over the old man's final moments, rose and stood by the well in the inner courtyard, gazing up at the rice plants for a long time. Her father-in-law had done so, and the old man had done so as well. Now that the touch of both of their hands had departed, Booney was truly alone. Yet, she was not afraid of that loneliness. In a corner of Booney's heart, the warmth of their lost touch remained. After concluding the 49th day memorial service for the old man, Bunin sat in the detached guest quarters, lost in thought for a long time. Her father-in-law had passed away, and the old man had also gone. Both of them had steered her toward the affairs of the Park family. Following their guidance, she had come this far. The purchase of the Park family house was a matter that could not be postponed for a few more days. If Bunin did not buy the Park family house that was up for sale, someone else. However, Bunin's heart wavered once again. Was this truly the path I should take? That night she sat in the loom room and unfolded her maternal grandmother's embroidery pattern. The plum blossoms on the first page, the crow's eye pattern on the second, everything was clearly visible under the lamplight. She recalled the words she had heard from her father-in-law on his deathbed. He who carelessly casts others out is bound to be cast out of that house himself. If someone casts you out, do not resent it, simply go your own way. Elder Han had said the same thing. How you decide the affairs of the Park family is up to you. However, do not let resentment in your heart decide it. Bunin took those 2 words to heart and reflected upon them again and again. Was the purchase of the Park family a move born of resentment? Was this her true path? She looked deep into her heart. It was not that she was entirely free of resentment. Her hardened teeth, which had been stiffened by her mother-in-law, had turned away after the incident, and the cold of that dirt floor still lingered in a corner of her heart. However, there was something greater than that resentment. Her heart for Muta. The fact that her child was the last descendant of the Park family. The crescent-shaped mark on the child's back. This is for Mutaya's sake. Purchasing the Park family house is not an act to cast out her mother-in-law, but an act to prepare a place for that child as Muta's mother. Bunin sat quietly for a long time, savoring that realization. It felt as if the burden on her heart was suddenly lightening. The words her father-in-law could not say. The words an old man could not tell her. All of them were leading to Bunny's resolve. Bunny lit incense once before the old man's memorial tablet and offered her final farewell. Elder, I will repay your kindness for accepting my father-in-law request until the very end. I will go not with resentment in my heart, but as Mutal's mother. That night, Mutal entered his mother's loom room. Mutal was a sturdy 9-year-old boy. Mother, where are you going? It seems you are packing your bags. Mutara, your mother has business to attend to a certain place in a few days. You will be going with her. Where are you going, mother? Mutara. There's a house where your mother used to live a long time ago. I have business to return to that house. Mutal simply nodded at the answer. He fiddled with his mother's clothes for a moment and returned to his room. The next morning, Bunin organized the items in her merchant guild and headed to the head of the Cheongjeongdo district where she was collecting debts from the Park family. Sitilogot Chont, the head of the district, wishes to purchase the Park family's property. I sat neatly before him and made this request. The head of the district observed the atmosphere for a while. You mean to say you are buying the Park family's house? Can you afford to buy such a large estate all at once? Yes. I have brought enough money to pay off all the debts. In addition, I have prepared enough to pay off each of the Park family's relatives. When the chest brought by Bunin was opened, the wife found neatly arranged silver and coins. The head of the district's gaze changed. With this amount, there will be more than enough to pay off all the debts. So the change of ownership of the Park family is truly taking place. Yes, master of the district. Please prepare a formal deed of sale, or please invite all of the Park family's relatives to attend. Also, I would appreciate it if you could invite one of the old servants, who has been with the Park family for a long time. If you call me the old servant, what is the reason? It is simply because I felt I needed to hear the truth of that day from his own lips, at least once. Gojang nodded deeply at Bun Yi's words. I understand, madam. The sale will be formally completed at the Park family's house in 3 days. I will have all the relatives of the Park family and the old servant attend. Bunin returned to the Han family's residence after receiving the village head's reply. 3 days passed and that morning arrived. Bunin was dressed in a deep purple silk dress. It was a garment made of silk woven by her own hands. Her hair was neatly styled, and she tucked in a small silver hairpin left by her maternal grandmother. She boarded a palanquin and headed toward the Park family's house. Upon arriving in front of the main gate, Bunin dismounted from the palanquin and gazed up at the gate for a long time. It was the same gate she had stepped onto 10 years ago, having dismounted from the palanquin with empty hands. The same gate. Yet, the Bunin in the intervening years was a completely different person. Inside the main gate, the village head, Lady Park, and other family relatives had already gathered. Madame Jongsi and Park Young-do were in the inner courtyard. Madame Jongsi looked significantly older in the past 10 years. She had lost weight and her hair had become more crooked. Yet, the rigid corners of her mouth remained the same. Park Young-woo was also present. Over the past 10 years, Park Young-hoon had become even more gaunt. Gambling concubines and failed deals were all etched onto his face. When Park Young-woo first recognized the atmosphere, his face hardened once. The lady of the household has arrived. I will now unfold the deed of sale. As the village head announced this, Lady Jong stepped forward and spoke up. Ujizasi. Atim, venerable head, what is the matter? You mean, Byeon. Are you saying that Bun is buying the Park house? That is correct. Madam Jong, you have paid off all of the Park family's debts. The new owner of the Park house is no longer you, madam. Absolutely not. The Park house belongs to the Park clan. How can someone who once cast out buy it back? Gojang replied calmly to those words. If you, Madame Jongzi, had purchased this as a daughter-in-law of the Park clan, this sale might be invalid. But you, Grandmaster, were cast out of this house 10 years ago. You are not a daughter-in-law of the Park clan. You purchased it merely as a commoner from the Chongcheng region, paying a fair price. The sale was conducted formally. Madame C's mouth froze at this answer. Toward Hyundai, she twisted the corners of her mouth once more. You are a dog who dares to turn things around and try to snatch my house. Madam, this house is no longer yours. The headman has formally completed the deed of sale. That was his, sir. However, Madame Zhongzi's shouting grew louder. How can you say that I have forgotten the incident where I brought misfortune upon the Park family and was driven out? How could a daughter-in-law who committed misfortune ever set foot in this house again? Madam, that misfortune was caused by you, not by me. Having finished speaking, Bunin handed the chest left by Old Man Han to the village head. When the head opened the chest, the wife found a letter written in Lord Park's own handwriting inside. This is a handwritten letter Lord Park sent to the Han family just before his death. Relatives of the Nuxi family, please take a look. As the head unfolded the letter and presented it to the relatives, they examined the handwriting one by one. It was clearly Lord Park's own handwriting. Here, written personally by Lord Park, he stated that his wife's nature is cruel. He said that his son, Yong-woo, cannot escape his mother's shadow. Therefore, he entrusted the daughter-in-law to Lady Han in advance. It is written there. One of the relatives from the Park family gazed at the written record for a long time and nodded deeply. Lord Park had already suspected everything just before his death. Akanoba, how could Lady Jungsin possibly deny this matter? Lady Jung's mouth froze on the spot. She stood there for a long time, unable to answer. Park Young-hoon stood beside his mother, his gaze lowered. Another person stepped forward to confront Lady Jung. Madame Jung, there is also the fact that you embezzled the Park family's assets to a temple. All of our relatives are already aware of this. Didn't the embezzlement begin in earnest around the time you cast out the noblewoman? What are you talking about? That was all my private funds. Even if it is your private funds, aren't they funds accumulated during your time as a daughter-in-law of the Park family? You embezzled the Park family's assets to use for your private funds. Will you still deny that matter? That is what I accumulated with my own hands after marrying into the Park family. I have never once embezzled it. Madam, where did the temple's donors come from? There is testimony that the temple's head monk personally received and kept records of the money you brought. Madame Zhongzie's face turned pale and stiff. Just then, an old servant came out of the inner room. He was the servant who had worked the longest in the Park household. Hojanim and Gesoheanim, I am a servant who has worked for the Park family for 30 years, Mizehers. I saw with my own 2 eyes that you were embezzling household goods from the detached quarters. Around that time, a slave disappeared, Silk, for the inner chambers vanished and sacks of grain were moved in the middle of the night. You sent them all to your family's temple, Madame Jungsi. Yes, you rascal. How could you speak such words regarding the examination? Rise, madam, I am already an old man, and I must tell the truth at least once before I leave. On the day you dismissed the Lady of Apim, Bunai did not commit any wrongdoing. Young Master Park, Young Woo definitely visited that dawn. I heard the sound of his shoes in the kitchen that morning. Park Young-woo's face hardened. For the first time in that moment, Park Young-woo looked Bunny in the eye. Yet, his eyes were empty. Young-woo, what do you mean? Didn't I say that I didn't visit that day? Lady Jong asked Park Young-woo. Park Young-woo remained silent for a long time. Then he slowly opened his mouth. Mother, it is true that I visited that night. Might. You instructed me to do so, which is why I answered that way. Madame Jongsim's face hardened for the last time. The moment the truth came from the lips of her close relatives, all the relatives of the Park family turned their backs on Madame Jong. The Park family would no longer tolerate anything related to Madame Jongsim. Return all the priests you smuggled out, to the temple, to the family. If you do not do so, the family will take separate action to dispose of them. And pack your bags and leave this house. The new mistress of the Park household is Bun. As Gojang announced this for the last time, Lady Jongsi's knees gave way on the spot. Her slumped shoulders twitched once. Park Young-do knelt beside his mother. Madam, the elders must accept that you have become the new mistress of the Park household. Now please enter the inner quarters. The atmosphere following the village, Headman's words slowly drifted into the inner quarters. The main room of the inner quarters. It was the very room where she had first met her mother-in-law 10 years ago. However, the owner of that room was now Bun. Park Young followed Bun in. Then he knelt before his wife. Madam, I do not know how to atone for what happened 10 years ago. Please, at least let me see the child once. I hear it is a boy. Madam gazed down at Park Young. For a long time, at least at the child's face. However, her heart remained unwavering. My dear husband, that child is mine. He is not a child of the Park family. Didn't mother cast me out in calling that child an unwholesome one? Since that child is beyond mother's reach, it is as if he does not exist in the Park family. Madam, even so you will not be able to meet him even once. However, if he grows up and seeks out the Park family on his own, that is his business. Not mine. Is not mine. That was her answer. Park Young-hoon was speechless at that moment. That evening, after the sale was officially completed, Lady Jong and Park Young-woo packed their belongings and left the Park family house. Lady Jong's personal shrine was fully recovered by the village head and family relatives, and even the offerings made to the temple were returned to the family's assets. Lady Jong came to take refuge in the small star of one of the family relatives. Park Young-woo could no longer live with his concubine Ok Sa-son and came to stay alone in a small country house. That night, Bunin sat alone in the main room of the Park family's house. It was the very room her mother-in-law had spoken of so coldly 10 years ago. Yet now, Bunin was the mistress of that room. Bunin gazed at the lamp in the room for a long time. She recalled the teaching her father-in-law had spoken. He who carelessly casts others out will eventually be cast out of that house. Her father-in-law had done so. Her mother-in-law had cast Bun out, and eventually she was the one cast out of that house. Father, sir, only now do I understand what your teachings truly were. The lady muttered to herself before the lamplight. The flame flickered once. The next morning, the lady gathered the members of her merchant guild in the inner courtyard of the Park family's house. The atmosphere was filled with women who had been taken in over time. Daughters-in-law driven out by their mothers-in-law. Women whose husbands had left early, widows and unmarried women who would not be accepted back by their parents' families. All these women had gathered in the front yard of the boxy house beneath a 100-year-old persimmon tree. Ladies and gentlemen, this boxy house will now become our workplace. The main building will be used as a bamboo frame room, the annex as an embroidery room, and the guest quarters as the main shop. Let us all work together and live together. At these words, the women all bowed deeply. One of the women asked them, Madam, since you are giving us such a large house, this must not become the home of just one person. I believe this is what father-in-law and the elders wished for. A house where someone who carelessly casts others stays is bound to be empty eventually. A house that welcomes people kindly is the one that lasts. At these words, the women each clapped their hands together. From that day on, the inner courtyard of the Park family house became the base of operations for a large fabric shop. The fabric business, which had started at the Han family's house, had moved to the Park families and grown even larger. Mutal followed his mother for a long time under the persimmon tree in the courtyard. One spring day, Mutal asked his mother, Mother, has this big house really become our home? That is correct, Mutal, replied Mutal. But rather than just a house, it is a home where we live together. It is not just your home, but the home of everyone who works here. Yes, Mother, I understand. Beneath the hem of Muralian youths, a crescent-shaped red dot remained embedded on his back. However, that dot was not visible to anyone, even within the Park family house. The owner simply wrapped his two hands around the child's back. As time passed, the Park family shop became famous as the largest fabric shop in the Chongcheong province area. When people heard it was a shop owned by a nobleman, every nobleman would come to visit at least once. At my workplace, I took in women with stories just like mine, one by one. I never asked anyone about their stories. It was enough that they had skillful hands. The words my father-in-law left on his deathbed. The words an old man left on his deathbed. Their teaching was the same single phrase. He who carelessly casts others out is bound to be cast out of that house himself. That single word from my father-in-law. That same word from the old man. That teaching always lived on in the loom room with its atmosphere, under the persimmon tree in the inner courtyard, and within the crescent-shaped dots embedded in the mutare, a type of woven fabric. This folktale is not merely the story of one woman. It is a single teaching formed by the convergence of three elements: my father-in-law's eyes that discerned a person's sincerity, the old man's hands that protected that sincerity to the very end, and the heart of a woman who never lost herself. Please press like and subscribe to be the first to watch the next video. Please also check out the other interesting videos currently playing on the screen. Have a happy day, everyone. Thank you.